The bell cut sharply through the silence of the cluttered office. Papers and magazines were scattered across the desk, their edges curling from age and neglect. Stig Agistad leaned forward, his hand hovering over the rotary phone as it trembled against the stacks of documents. He exhaled, then lifted the receiver, his voice steady despite the sudden tension. "UFO Sweden News," he said. A trembling male voice answered through the static. "Do you know anyone who's been injured by a UFO? Because that happened to me." Stig froze, every word sinking into the room like a physical weight. The man unidentified himself as Carl Eric Peterson, and the urgency in his tone made the story impossible to ignore. Outside the window, wind rattled the panes, and the typewriter remained silent, a mute witness to the start of a mystery that would stretch decades. Stig felt the call etching itself into his memory, a puzzle he would follow relentlessly. 4 years later, the call becomes a headline. Now it has happened. Man from Örebro, seriously injured in close encounter. Stig Agistad stares at the printed page, fingers smudged with ink. The newsroom hums with activity, but he is alone with the weight of Carl Eric Peterson's story. Each word Carl Eric spoke over the phone echoes in his mind, filled with raw pain and quiet desperation. Typing the article feels heavy, as though the letters themselves carry the burden of a man's life-altering experience. Stig pauses, wondering if the world is ready to accept what Carl Eric endured, or if disbelief will swallow the truth before anyone can understand it. Summer night 1978, over Örebro. Heat lingers, thick in the air. Inside the Peterson home, windows stand open, curtains swaying in the warm breeze. Carl Eric Peterson sleeps beside his wife, both lost in dreams. Suddenly, he wakes, a chill crawling over his skin. At the foot of the bed stands a figure half-transparent, featureless and small. It moves closer with intent. Hands grip his ankles, and a surge of pain courses through him, electric and undeniable. He screams, thrashing violently. The figure releases him, drifting through the balcony door into the humid night. His wife wakes, startled. Too late to see what vanished. Only the echo of terror remains. After the chaos, Carl Eric sits on the edge of the bed, trembling. His wife kneels beside him, hands hovering near his feet. 2 perfect white circular marks glow faintly where the being touched him. The marks remain for 2 days, cold and unexplainable. Neither speaks of it aloud, but the memory lingers, a quiet horror embedded in flesh. Even as sunlight creeps across the floorboards, the strange imprint refuses to fade from their minds. Every glance at his feet reminds him that something beyond understanding has left its mark, and life will never feel entirely safe again. Carl Eric keeps the experience secret. Fear of ridicule outweighs the pain, though the ache grows with every step. Weeks pass, and he can barely walk. Finally, he visits the company doctor, speaking carefully, hiding the truth behind vague complaints. The doctor frowns, puzzled at X-rays showing lifeless nerves in Carl Eric's feet, yet otherwise normal blood flow and structure. Carl Eric says nothing of that night. In the quiet between questions, he hears again the faint hum, the prelude to pain. It will follow him for years, shaping his life and limiting his steps long after the world forgets. Carl Eric Peterson felt a cold dread crawl up his spine as he returned home that evening. The memory of the being lingered, a silent specter in every shadow. Every creak of the floor seemed to echo its presence. He shook his head, trying to dismiss the lingering pain in his feet, but it pulsed like a warning. Something about that night had changed him, and he could no longer pretend it was just a dream. The air seemed charged with anticipation, the stillness almost mocking his unease. He knew he had to investigate further. Every step toward understanding was fraught with fear, yet he could not stop himself. Carl Eric returned to the balcony where the being had vanished. The night air was thick and humid, carrying the scent of summer grass. He traced the railing with his fingertips, imagining where it had floated. Each heartbeat felt loud, echoing in the silent house. The pain in his ankles flared, sharp and unyielding, reminding him that this encounter was no figment of imagination. He thought of his wife, still asleep, unaware of the terror that had gripped him. He had to know what had touched him and why it had left him marked. The questions burned, but answers remained stubbornly out of reach, hidden behind the veil of that impossible night. The next day, Carl Eric consulted a company doctor, careful with words. His voice was calm, measured, hiding the urgency behind polite concern. The doctor, male 48, neatly dressed in a white coat, frowned at the unusual markings on Carl Eric's feet. Tests were ordered, each procedure mechanical and sterile. Yet each result deepened the mystery. The nervous system in his feet appeared dead, yet blood flow and bones were normal. Carl Eric felt trapped in a world that would not see his truth. The encounter had moved from the shadows of night into the harsh glare of scrutiny, but still, no explanation came. Medical visits multiplied. X-rays, urine tests, ECGs, blood samples, each one revealed nothing abnormal beyond the damage to his nervous system. Doctors exchanged puzzled glances. Carl Eric sat silently, enduring their questions and curiosity. Each visit reminded him of the being, the invisible force that had altered his life. Friends asked about the pain, and he downplayed it, fearing disbelief. The frustration was unbearable. He had no evidence, only the lingering marks and the excruciating sensation in his feet. The world around him was moving forward, oblivious, while he remained ensnared in the consequences of a night that should not have existed. Weeks turned to months. Carl Eric's mobility worsened, and he considered retiring from the auto parts business he loved. Pain and fatigue had become constant companions. His family watched silently, uncertain how to help. The invisible wound, the lingering mystery, shadowed every decision. The thought of speaking aloud brought fear of ridicule. Yet, inside, a quiet determination burned. He would endure, seek answers, and document the truth. The being's presence, though unseen, had driven him into a labyrinth of medical uncertainty and personal struggle. Every day was a test of endurance, each step a reminder that some encounters leave more than memories, they leave scars that cannot be healed. 4 years after the encounter, Carl Eric returned to the regional hospital for another examination. The memory of the night had never faded, and neither had the pain. X-rays revealed something impossible, a small, glowing sphere lodged deep inside his left foot. Doctors stared, uncertain, murmuring among themselves. They could not explain its origin, yet it was clearly visible about 4 or 5 millimeters in diameter near the heel joint. Carl Eric felt a mixture of relief and dread. Relief that there was something tangible, dread that it defied understanding. The sphere was a silent witness, a permanent mark of that summer night. Carl Eric was advised the object could be surgically removed, though it posed no immediate danger. The doctors expressed uncertainty about its origin. Carl Eric refused surgery. The thought of cutting into his body for something beyond comprehension was unbearable. The glowing sphere remained inside him, a quiet and persistent reminder of that night. It was both evidence and enigma. Every step was painful, yet the sphere's presence seemed to anchor him to the truth of his experience. He would live with it, silently, carrying proof that science could not yet explain. Word of Carl Eric's condition reached friends and family. Skepticism mingled with concern. His sons, Bo and Wolf, struggled to reconcile the man they knew with the story he told. They examined his feet and saw the faint marks, confirming their father's claims. Carl Eric remained steadfast. His life had changed irreversibly. He could no longer manage the business, nor ignore the persistent pain. Each day became a careful negotiation between physical limitation and determination. The invisible trauma of that night had concrete consequences, and the glowing sphere became the symbol of a reality that few would believe, but all could see in its effects. Doctors continued testing. Neurological exams confirmed the nerves in Carl Eric's feet were damaged. Circulatory and vascular systems were normal. No conventional medical explanation sufficed. Carl Eric endured repeated scrutiny, each test both frustrating and validating. His pain was real, his condition undeniable. Yet the glowing sphere and the unusual nerve damage left a profound question. What had caused it? The boundary between science and the inexplicable blurred. Every consultation reinforced that the encounter was not just memory or imagination, it was tangible, physical, and entirely mysterious. Carl Eric reflected on his life, the encounter, and the enduring pain. He had lived with doubt and fear, with invisible wounds made visible only by a tiny, glowing object. Friends whispered. Sons questioned, yet he remained certain. The sphere, small and enigmatic, embodied the collision of ordinary life and the extraordinary. He could not explain it, but he could not deny it either. His footsteps, labored and deliberate, carried the weight of an experience few could comprehend. Every day, the memory of the night intertwined with the physical reality of his feet, creating a quiet, unshakable proof that the unknown could touch the known in ways no one could fully understand. Carl Eric returned to the hospital for a follow-up X-ray. The glowing sphere remained lodged in his left foot, small but unmistakable. Doctors examined the images in silence, exchanging concerned whispers. Carl Eric felt a mix of defiance and resignation. They could not explain it, and yet it was undeniably present. Each step he took reminded him of that night. The presence of the sphere was a silent accusation against the limits of understanding. He realized that whatever force had touched him, it had changed not only his body, but the course of his life. He would carry this proof. Unspoken and immutable, Carl Eric confronted the reality of his injury with quiet determination. The tests, the pain, the glowing sphere all pointed to one undeniable truth: something extraordinary had occurred. He spoke carefully to friends and family, revealing the details he had kept hidden for years. Bo and Wolf listened, skeptical at first, then attentive as they observed the lingering marks on their father's feet. Carl Eric explained how the being had touched him, the sudden electric pain, and the lasting evidence. He did not ask for belief, only acknowledgement. His story was not legend. It was lived experience etched into his body and his life. Medical consultations intensified. Neurologists confirmed that the nerves in Carl Eric's feet were largely dead. Yet, vascular and circulatory systems were normal. Doctors were baffled. Carl Eric felt the isolation of disbelief pressing down on him. Each appointment became a confrontation between lived reality and institutional skepticism. He endured repeated questions, tests, and scrutiny without faltering. The glowing sphere remained, a symbol of the inexplicable, challenging the limits of medical knowledge. Each step he took was a confrontation with his own mortality and the unseen forces that had touched him that night. Carl Eric's physical suffering was mirrored by the weight of secrecy. He could not share details with colleagues or friends without risking ridicule. Yet he persisted in documenting his experiences and medical findings. Each new examination, each X-ray, each doctor's question became a test of endurance. He confronted the unknown with quiet dignity, facing a truth that few could comprehend. The sphere in his foot was proof of an encounter beyond explanation, a confrontation with forces that defied the ordinary. This revelation shaped every aspect of his daily life, from his business to his family interactions. The culmination of months of uncertainty arrived when Carl Eric allowed investigators from UFO Sweden to review his case. Stig Agestad documented the story with careful attention, recording every detail. Carl Eric remained composed, recounting the encounter, the marks, and the glowing sphere. For the first time, he felt the possibility of being understood, even if only partially. The revelation was both personal and public, a confrontation with disbelief and validation. Yet, even with documentation, the mystery of what had occurred remained unresolved. leaving questions lingering about the limits of perception and the boundaries between ordinary life and extraordinary events. The weeks following Carl Eric's confrontation with the investigators were filled with quiet reflection. He considered his life, the lingering pain, and the impossibility of what had occurred. The glowing sphere remained lodged in his foot, a constant reminder of that summer night. Friends and colleagues watched silently, uncertain whether to ask questions or offer sympathy. Carl Eric walked carefully, each step a negotiation between physical limitation and perseverance. Despite skepticism, he felt a sense of quiet vindication. The documentation ensured that his experience was no longer solely his own, yet it carried a burden of permanence that would shadow him for the rest of his life. Carl Eric's business suffered as his mobility declined. Walking long distances became impossible. He reluctantly arranged for early retirement and adjusted his life to accommodate persistent pain. Each day was structured around avoiding fatigue and managing discomfort. Insurance and medical paperwork added to the burden. Yet amidst the logistical challenges, he remained focused on his family. Bo and Wolf grew more attentive, aware that their father carried an invisible weight beyond ordinary hardship. The physical and emotional consequences of that night had reshaped their family dynamic, leaving scars that could not be measured by X-rays or examinations. Months passed, and Carl Eric grew accustomed to his altered reality. The glowing sphere was an enduring presence, a reminder of a moment that defied explanation. Pain and fatigue dictated his schedule, but he maintained dignity and composure. Friends occasionally inquired about the incident, and he answered selectively, careful not to invite ridicule. Yet in private, he continued documenting everything's symptoms, examinations, and reflections. His experience had become a part of his identity. While the world dismissed the extraordinary, Carl Eric held the truth in his own body, in the marks on his feet, and in the small, inexplicable object that refused to leave. Despite medical attention and repeated tests, the sphere remained untouchable and enigmatic. Doctors could describe its location, but not its origin. Carl Eric's pain persisted, though partially manageable. Conversations with his sons became moments of cautious honesty. He explained what he had experienced, the marks, the high-voltage sensation, and the physical consequences. Bo and Wolf listened with a mix of awe and skepticism, learning that some truths existed beyond rational explanation. Carl Eric's ordeal became a lesson in endurance, illustrating the intersection of ordinary life with forces no one could name or predict. Carl Eric reflected on the enduring mystery. He had faced disbelief, medical uncertainty, and chronic pain, yet he maintained his integrity, refusing to fabricate or exaggerate. The sphere was proof, even if its nature remained unknowable. Life moved forward, structured around careful steps and measured routines. Family became central, and moments of quiet understanding replaced the need for external validation. While the world might never accept his experience, Carl Eric knew the truth. The encounter had left him marked in body, mind, and memory, a constant reminder of forces beyond comprehension and the fragility of human understanding when confronted with the unknown. Years had passed since the initial encounter, but Carl Eric Peterson could not escape its shadow. The glowing sphere remained, an inexplicable presence in his left foot. Investigators and journalists occasionally revisited the case, seeking clarity. Stig Agestad remained one of the few who truly listened, recording every detail meticulously. Carl Eric reflected on each examination, each test, and the ongoing skepticism. He realized that his story was now more than personal suffering. It had become part of a larger narrative of unexplained phenomena. The memory of that night remained vivid, a warning and a testament to forces that human understanding could not yet grasp. Carl Eric revisited the hospital one last time, determined to document all remaining details. Neurologists confirmed that the nerves in his feet were permanently damaged. Circulation remained normal. The glowing sphere remained lodged, a small, inscrutable object that refused removal. Each X-ray reinforced his certainty. even as medical staff offered cautious explanations. Carl Eric maintained composure, explaining every sensation and mark with precision. He was no longer seeking validation. He was creating a record for posterity. This final investigation was a personal reckoning and a testament to the life-altering consequences of a single encounter. Bo and Wolf accompanied their father during this process. They had witnessed his suffering and the evidence of the marks on his feet. They questioned, observed, and learned about the persistence of physical trauma from an event they could barely comprehend. Carl Eric explained the sensations: sudden electric pain, lingering discomfort, and the presence of the glowing sphere. The sons absorbed the story carefully, recognizing both the physical and emotional toll. Carl Eric emphasized the importance of truth, regardless of disbelief. This final reflection bound father and sons together in shared awareness, bridging the gap between mystery and lived experience. Investigators noted the contrast between Carl Eric's ordinary life and the extraordinary nature of his experience. He was a husband, father, and small business owner, yet he carried evidence of something no science could explain. His persistence in documentation, combined with medical examinations, created an unprecedented case. Carl Eric reflected on the isolation he had felt during years of skepticism, yet also on the validation offered by careful investigation. The glowing sphere had become a symbol not only of the encounter, but of endurance, of maintaining integrity in the face of incomprehensible events. The final review concluded that the mystery of the glowing sphere remained unsolved. Carl Eric accepted that some questions would never be answered. He reflected on the encounter, the pain, and the enduring physical evidence, realizing that the truth mattered more than explanation. The sphere was a permanent reminder that life could intersect with forces beyond comprehension. While the world may never fully believe, he knew the reality of what had occurred. The investigation had captured every detail, preserving his story for posterity. His reflection became a bridge between experience and documentation, mystery and endurance, pain and perseverance. Carl Eric Peterson lived the final years of his life with the glowing sphere lodged in his foot. It remained an unexplainable part of his body, a silent witness to the night that had altered him forever. Though friends and family questioned, doubted, or marveled, he maintained dignity and patience. Each day was structured around his limitations, yet filled with quiet purpose. The encounter, once terrifying and isolating, had become a defining element of his existence. He accepted that the sphere would never be explained, and that some truths existed only in lived experience. His life was a testament to endurance and the resilience of the human spirit in the face of the unknown. Bo and Wolf grew into young adults, aware of their father's enduring struggle. They reflected on his courage and persistence, recognizing the magnitude of what he had endured. Carl Eric's experiences shaped their understanding of life, of perseverance, and of the unknown. While others may have dismissed the story as impossible, the sons knew the truth. The marks, the pain, the glowing sphere were real. Carl Eric's legacy was not only the life he led, but the story he left behind, a story of endurance, mystery, and unwavering honesty in the face of skepticism. Journalists and UFO investigators continued to reference Carl Eric's case, noting its unusual and tragic nature. Stig-Agestad archived the reports, interviews, and X-rays for posterity. Carl Eric understood that while the truth might never reach consensus, it was preserved for future generations. His story bridged the gap between ordinary life and extraordinary experience, revealing the limits of human understanding. Every record, every interview was a testament to what had occurred. Though the sphere remained a mystery, it also became a symbol of endurance, documenting the profound consequences of a brief, unexplainable encounter. As Carl Eric aged, he reflected on the extraordinary events that had reshaped his life. The glowing sphere, the marks, the pain, they were all enduring evidence. He embraced the mystery without resentment, finding meaning in his perseverance and honesty. The encounter had changed his career, his health, and his daily routine. Yet it also strengthened his bonds with his family. Bo and Wolf learned to value careful observation, skepticism tempered by compassion, and the courage to live truthfully even when the world doubts. The legacy of the encounter extended beyond Carl Eric himself, touching those who witnessed, recorded, and remembered his story. Carl Eric Peterson passed away at the end of 1990, leaving behind a story that would never be fully explained. The glowing sphere in his foot, the marks, and the lingering pain were all preserved in records, x-rays, and memories. Stig Agestad and UFO Sweden documented his life and experiences, ensuring that his endurance, integrity, and mystery would endure. His sons remembered his courage and the unwavering belief in his own senses. Though questions remain unanswered, Carl Eric's legacy is a testament to resilience, the intersection of ordinary life with the extraordinary, and the profound impact of encounters that defy understanding.